Despite the great silver panic of 1873, the fact is this, and you're in a state that is dependent on mining, it's growing like crazy. It's growing like weeds. Denver only had 10 to 15,000 people from what my research showed me at the start of this decade, but it's expected to reach 100,000 people by 1880. It must be the railroads that you referred to that's fueling all this growth. But back east, we hear some pretty disturbing stories. We've heard that there are reports about open warfare between competing railroads. We even heard a story about a kidnapping of a Judge Stone being taken hostage by a Colorado Central railroad. And their company went into receivership for a debt of $800,000 to the Union Pacific. I talked to Cipriano Salazar, checking my notes here, at the train station, who expressed his concerns over the changes the railroads were bringing to a San Luis Valley.
These have been difficult years for my people. The land is being taken from us, sometimes stolen, sometimes through murder, sometimes through unscrupulous lawyers. We're losing the land. And with the trains and this new economy, sometimes we have to go and work the fields that we once owned. And in the railroads and in the mines, we're discriminated against. We're always the last to be hired, and we get paid less than everybody else. Our whole beautiful communal way of living and sharing and working together is fading away.
Representative Patterson, let me start with you. Are you at all worried about this rapid growth that may come crashing down at any moment here in the great state of Colorado?
Well, we've already had quite a crash, starting with the panic of 1873, and certainly our state could be growing much better if not for some bad policies. You talked about the railroads. The naive territorial settlers gave all kinds of subsidies and bond guarantees and everything else to railroads in the hopes that it would help our state, our territory, grow more rapidly. And as the Colorado Central fiasco shows, these corporations with people like Jay Gould, the famous swindler, have broken their promises to the people of Colorado. So our new 1876 Constitution, it's the strongest in the nation right now. It has 4 separate clauses that absolutely prohibit, under any circumstances, government aid to businesses, government taking on the indebtedness of businesses, all of those. So we've solved that problem, completely prohibited in the strongest language possible. Our mining has been drastically hurt by what happened in Congress in 1873 before I came there. From 1792, when Alexander Hamilton, our great Secretary of Treasury, put the United States on bimetallism, gold is legal tender, silver is legal tender. That's what we had until 1873, when Congress and the Grant administration foolishly imitated Germany and demonetized silver. I've been fighting to change that, to put silver back as legal tender. I've been fighting for surveys, for the federal government to survey our gold and mining regions, and I've been fighting to put a new silver mint for the United States Treasury in Denver. If we do that, that will get us out of the economic hole that we're in.
Well, Mrs. Rout, I'm sure that your husband is worried about the great growth and its effect on the state. What do you think about this?
I think worried in a great way. It's a fantastic time for the state to establish itself in the union. As we've been discussing, there's so many resources here, both in the people and in the ore in our mountains and in our economy, that we have the opportunity to really establish Colorado as a destination. And while some people may be surprised by the stories of how we conduct business out here, I think it's because they come at it with an Eastern attitude. I'm not sure that their stories are that different than what's happening in New York and D.C. They maybe wear a little bit of a different clothing.
Well, I can tell you personally, they do not do business like this in Maine. I cannot remember the time any judge was kidnapped or any sort of held hostage for anything, but I understand your point. Mr. Byers, what do you say of some of these comments we've heard from the Cipriano Salazar about people being displaced and ways of life being changed in the San Luis Valley and all of this growth despite a silver panic?
Well, that's progress. That's progress indeed. And I got to agree with the First Lady here that these kinds of depredations have happened in railroad wars back east just as much as out here. I'm sure if we delved into the history, we'd find many sordid tales on railroads back east. But the congressman here, the representative, is quite mistaken. I think it is that the land grants that helped the railroads, helped the Denver Pacific, and helped the Kansas Pacific get here to Denver, and the Colorado Central even with that scoundrel Bill Loveland. I'll tell you what, that is what's kept this state going. That's what's fueled the growth despite the panic, despite the demonetization of silver. And I'll tell you what, I'm on board with him on that regard. We need to remonetize silver because that will spur even more mining in Colorado because it increases the value of it, of course. We need to do that. But I'll tell you what, that's the Democratic Party's way of thinking, is that you don't help out business. And I don't go along with that. That's the only thing that's keeping us afloat out here, is the growth fueled by the coming of the railroads. If Mr. Patterson thinks I'm going to sell him my newspaper, he's got another thing. I'll sell it to Bill Loveland before I'd sell it to Tom Patterson.
Indeed. Well, Mrs. Tabor, you mentioned some experience. I think you said Leadville. Obviously, you know about this mining. Are you concerned about that we'll ever get out of this silver panic?
Well, I'm sure we will. And my dear man, I'm from Maine too, so you can just imagine how different this wild and woolly West is. I had to come down from Stagecoach from Leadville because we don't have a train out there. We are certainly looking forward to a train helping all those mining communities. And as for silver, you know, last year we had a find up in Leadville. We now found some lead carbonate, which shows very promising possibilities for Leadville, which has just been scraping along to perhaps one day really benefit from a silver boom. So we are hoping it will work, and we are hoping we get the railroad there.